You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Well, welcome back, book lovers. We are super excited because we have the writing duo, Andrews and Wilson, Brian Andrews and Jeff Wilson, back with us here today. They've been on the show before, but today we're going to talk about their new Tom Clancy novel called Defense Protocol. Welcome back, both of you. We're excited.
Always great to be here. Thanks for having us back. I guess we did okay last time because you invited us back.
You were fantastic. We love your writing, especially the two of you put together, dynamic duo. In fact, let me tell our listeners, they are the New York Times, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and #1 Amazon best-selling author team. Wow. Multiple covert ops and action adventure thriller series. We've loved them all. And let me just split you up and tell a little bit about each of you because you've got a very cool bio. Brian is a U.S. Navy veteran, Park Leadership Fellow, former submarine officer with a psychology degree from Vanderbilt and a master's from Cornell. He is a principal contributor at Career Authors, which is a site dedicated to advancing the careers of aspiring and published writers. Thank you for doing that. It's a great give back. Jeff has worked as an actor, firefighter, paramedic, jet pilot, diving instructor. What more could you do? Wait for it. Vascular and trauma surgeon, of course. He's served in the U.S. Navy for 14 years. He's made multiple deployments as a combat surgeon with a SEAL team. He and his wife, Wendy, live in Southwest Florida, and the two of them together also have a series, Sons of Valor, the very first book in that series, which is in development for film, which we're very excited. And we're going to hopefully meet with them again in July to talk about that book. So you've got a lot going on. Thank you in the busyness of it for stopping by to meet with us. We can't wait to dive down deep.
We would put everything on pause to talk to you guys. Don't you worry. Anytime.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Anytime. Yeah, you missed something in my bio. I also baled hay one summer at a farm.
He also works in every single one of those Halloween pop-up stores too, just so you know.
Well, you have humble beginnings somewhere, but we're going to hold you to that. Now it's recorded. You're coming back.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, as Chris mentioned, we're here to talk about your newest release, Defense Protocol. We loved this book. It kept us on the edge of our seat. And I want to tell our listeners a little bit about what's going on. And I promise not to give away any spoilers. I know that is super tough. And if you want to add anything, by all means, do so. Now, in this story, we are thrust right into the middle of the tension between Taiwan, an independent nation to all of us, and China, who regards Taiwan as its province. Now, for years, we know, of course, just from our knowledge of history and politics and today's news, that this is something that China has designs on Taiwan. They have put economic pressure, political pressure. But in their story, the new fictional president of China wants to do something a little different, a little more aggressive. Now, there's one person who can potentially stop the new president of China. He goes by Li, President Li. And this one person is the Minister of Defense. Now, he makes contact with the CIA, and this is a dangerous position to be in. I couldn't figure out how you were going to potentially extricate this person from China. But as the story unfolds, we see where this elite team is put together. They need to protect those secrets. They need to protect this defense minister. But now everybody's lives are on the line. And because of the United States Defense Protocol for dealing with China, for dealing with situations along these lines. Everything is on the line, even mutual destruction. Now, in this story, of course, we have our president, Ryan, and we also follow the story of his daughter. And she is a lieutenant commander, Katie Ryan, and her star is rising. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But we also see where she is at the tip of the spear, right in the zone of danger. Now we've got some hard decisions to make. Did you want to add anything to that backdrop?
Oh
Pretty
no,
good.
that was perfect. You should work for Putnam and write the dust jacket.
No
She
problem.
she would love to. People tell her that all the time. Now, all our listeners are tired of me saying this, but they tell her to go on book tour. And I said, can I come? I'll just carry your briefcase. Do anything. So let me tell for our listeners, this is real world stuff. It's actually quite timely, this story. You showed the reader that war is no longer simply fought on land and sea and air. We are globally political and we are globally economic. In fact, right now, Jack Ryan and everyone in this real world is saying that a failed Chinese economy would affect us globally. So would a failed US economy, let me add. And I had to ask you, why did you choose for a possibility of World War III that the site would be Taiwan, because very current, and also why the US versus China?
Well, I mean, all of our stuff, the Tier 1 series, Sons of Valor series that you referenced, and now we're bringing it to the Clancy series, we try to incorporate real world geopolitics as much as we can. Not just because it's interesting to the reader, but from an immature standpoint, it's more interesting for us. So we're avid readers and students of both history and current events as they regard, national defense policy and stuff like that. So it's very natural for us to gravitate towards those real life what if situation type questions that we used to war game out in our previous careers. And so this one was a pretty easy one for us to latch onto, because I think it's most people would agree, if it's not the number one, it's definitely one of the top one or two next real world global threats. And how committed is the United States to Taiwan? How committed are we to the extent that it will affect the United States directly? There's reasons why we want to maintain our relationship with Taiwan for sure. We want to lessen our dependence on other sources of electronics and microprocessors, but there's also disadvantages of being at war, both economically and for other reasons, defense reasons, with China. So it's something I think that everyone's grappling with. They are the boogeyman right now that we're most focused on. So it's very easy to take a character like Jack Ryan and put him in the office. You want Jack Ryan to be president when this really happens, right? Somebody that is driven by the needs of others. He's team and mission before self. He's about the greater good. And he is kind of that Boy Scout, things are right or they're wrong, and I'm not going to do the wrong thing. And then Katie, of course, I'll let Brian talk about Katie, but she's one of our favorite characters I think that we've ever developed.
Mm-hmm. She's amazing. And I'm sitting here hoping maybe future president. What do you
Oh,
think? What do you think, Brian?
I mean, it's fun to think about, the family business. And, it's not, I don't think, well, in real life now with the Trump family and ultimately them having different roles in government, I think sometimes fiction mirrors real life. And so we always knew, even when we were reading the Clancy books from a long time ago, that it seemed to make sense that the kids would be somehow involved in the family business. Now, in the case of the Ryans, the family business, the dad, Jack Ryan, grew up as a CIA analyst, right? So the family business has always been sort of analyzing these geopolitical situations and trying to find a solution when it seems like there isn't any. And I think that's always been sort of Jack Ryan's superpower, is to look at all the puzzle pieces and find a way to put them together to avoid catastrophe, and do it in a way that is principle based, right? Like Jeff said, he's the guy, he's the Boy Scout whose moral compass is uncorruptible. And so with Katie, what's fun is, this was a character that we were sort of responsible for and given the freedom to develop in the series. You know, Jack Ryan Jr. has his own series, but we'd only seen Katie as a small child, you know, back in the canon and Patriot games. And so it's fun to see, okay, well, what would she be like as she's growing up under sort of the shadow of her big brother, who's now an action hero in his own right,
Yeah.
and her dad has now become president of the United States. And I think what we found writing Katie is that she's, you know, where Jack Jr. has sort of said, well, I'm taking this path, my dad took this path. Katie's definitely more on the same path as her dad, you know, very analytical, strong moral compass, not a warrior. You know, she's not a Navy SEAL. She is in the Navy, but she works for the Office of Naval Intelligence. And so, you know, she's out there trying to prove herself with her own skill set and her own credibility, not trying to rely on just her dad or her brother to be the one that gives her credibility in her field.
Mhm. And I love the way you always put her right in the middle of everything. She gets on the helicopter headed to Taiwan, and I'm like, of course she's going there. Last time she was on a ship. We love it. Thanks.
Well, and that's, that was what was always fun about Jack, right? Like in the original books. And because this series has lasted so long, I think one thing that Clancy did that was brilliant was he didn't just keep him 25 for 400 books, right? He
Mm-hmm.
has shown his whole life and his family's life arc out. Well, that's great, and it makes for a wonderful, wonderful story and legacy. But as the writers who are now responsible for it, it's very limiting. Like Jack Ryan is the president. He's not going to be fast roping out of any helicopters. But what was my favorite thing about the original Jack Ryan was that he was that fish out of water, right? I'm just an analyst. All those times you heard him say, I'm just an analyst. And we sort of have lost that from the series because he's the president now. And as Brian pointed out, Jack Jr., he is an action hero, right? He is really more what the Krasinski character is in the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And so that's been lacking in the series. And by developing Katie, we were able to bring it back because Katie is that Jack Ryan analog almost for the modern reader, where she is like, I don't want to be here. I want to be in my office analyzing data, but I can't not go.
Mhm.
I can't let it go. The other fun thing about developing Katie was it's a new opportunity to develop Jack. Like there's not much left unexplored about who Jack Ryan is. I mean, he's actually a part of our national culture, the fiber of our culture now. So there's not a lot of unanswered questions about who Jack is and what he would do in a certain situation. But one thing you've never seen of Jack until these two books is the daddy that he is, the girl daddy, right? Like Brian and I both have daughters, and that relationship, my relationship with my daughters, is not like any other relationship on earth. Not like that with my other children, not like that what's with my wife, with my work partner, nothing. It's a special relationship. And I think it gave us an opportunity to explore other sides of Jack Ryan's personality that we couldn't have explored otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's why we open the book with them playing Battleship, right?
Yeah.
I
It,
love that
it
scene.
it's sort of a metaphor for the plot of the book, right? The big naval positioning, and you can't see behind the board of what the other person is doing, right? As they're taking shots, but also this bonding moment between father and daughter, and father and daughter sort of being analytical and making moves, right? That was sort of a metaphor for the book, and I think the other thing we just want to bring up for your listeners that's important is that through Katie, we're able to. You mentioned it in Act of Defiance. She is a visitor on the USS Washington, a Blackfish. She's never been on a submarine. She has to go to sea, and she deploys, and she's thrust, as Jeff said, she's that fish out of water. In this case, she became a fish underwater, right? So she's now in an environment where she'd never been before. So we get to show the world what it's like to operate on a submarine. In this book, our hero platform, or the platform that we showcased, was an Arleigh Burke class destroyer. And again, Katie Ryan is there, and we get to show the world what it's like to be in CIC, the Combat Information Center, on a Arleigh Burke, on the surface, how it's different than a submarine, its role's different, its vulnerabilities are different as it's navigating a very stressful and tactical situation over there in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait. So
Yeah.
that was really fun for us to highlight a new big Navy platform and show that to the world.
I actually want to pick right up there, if you don't mind, Brian, and ask you about that because, we saw her in her new role, new environment, and her job was to uncover the truth and gather some real-time evidence and intelligence and also feed it to the fleet. This is a little different than what she normally does. And she had some reservations. There were a couple times where she was like, I don't know exactly how to do this or what I'm doing. How did she develop that confidence? Because we see really significant outside things going on and also a little self-doubt.
So I love that you noticed that in the story, and that was something that Jeff and I spent some time discussing and actually being quite intentional about. Is this because that's real life? You show up, you've been given this assignment, and she's verbalizing this idea that, well, wait a minute, I'm given these marching orders, but they're pretty incomplete. I'm not even really sure like what my job's supposed to be. What are you expecting me to do? And then you show up on station and it's like nobody's going to tell you. I mean, no one's going to spoon feed you. And so you can sort of fake it till you make it. But that can be dangerous, especially when you're in a position where lives are at stake. So her response actually shows quite a bit of self-awareness and self-confidence, which is she's comfortable saying, "Hey, what are we doing here? What do you need from me? What am I supposed to be doing? Explain this to me." And a lot of people are, because of their ego, wouldn't be able to do that, right? They'd be afraid to show that weakness and vulnerability. And we kind of turned it on its head with Katie because she's not afraid to say what she does know and what she doesn't know, so that she actually has the information to make an informed decision.
Yeah. And I think too, with people in that generation, we see a little bit more of that frankness. That was something that had I gone into that situation, I wouldn't have been maybe comfortable saying, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. But I notice with, for example, my students and younger people, my kids who are adults, they have that very frank, upfront, look, here's how it is, you know, deal with it. And I loved that attitude that she had. She just has a great attitude throughout. Beautifully done. Beautifully done.
I'm saying I'm voting future president. We don't know. It's still out there. Now,
The
let
other
me
fun
see.
thing about Katie, because we go back to the roots of a fish out of water character, we love being able to highlight these platforms. Brian mentioned that we sort of highlight the Arleigh Burke destroyer, which is not, from the outside looking in, it's not a very sexy platform. Like Navy SEALs get a lot of airtime, fighter jets are cool, submarines are so mysterious, but the surface fleet sort of gets a bad rap. Is like, okay,
Mhm.
they're just the boat guys, right? And that's not true at all. And we enjoyed our experience. The Navy supported us in this book, just like the last one. When we went out on an Arleigh Burke and we met with the crew and talked about them. And we've been in the CIC and seen how it works. And it was a fascinating thing. We wanted to share all that. But one thing we've learned over the years is that readers love to learn, but oh my gosh, they hate to be taught. And
Mhm.
so you have to let them see things through the eyes of another character. You can't just explain to them how an Arleigh Burke works because it's boring, right? But if you have a character like Katie who's trying to figure it out, they'll go on her journey and they will love and cherish what they learn on it because they don't feel like you're teaching them. And so having that Katie character affords us that opportunity. We took advantage of it when we got to share what we know about, at least the unclassed stuff about the Blackfish. And now we can do it again with the Arleigh Burke platform and some of the SEAL characters that are in here. So that was really a fun opportunity for us.
Mhm. Yeah, we loved it. We went along with her and I learned so much. And I guess that's the reader thinking that they're slyly learning something
Yeah,
without intentionally being told to learn it, like a textbook. And that's good
right.
stuff. I also love this character. I think I'm going to pronounce it right. Chule,
Mm-hmm.
Autumn Thunder, the
Yeah.
spider. Is that how you
Yeah.
pronounce it? She
Yeah.
was, for our listeners, she was a support asset aiding the CIA. She wasn't CIA, she was a support asset, which I thought was pretty cool. She was in China for 15 years. She began training at age 6 as an expert in Kung Fu, but she was also trained in education, math, science, history. Her father said this, which really made me think: with your mind and body aligned, you will accomplish great things. So I'm using this almost like an allegory to the US and China. You need physical strength, but you better have wit. And maybe you better have some morals too. We witnessed these defensive tactics that you showed us and offensive from the US and China. And I had to ask you, I started wondering, was Chu Lei an example of like a perfect military?
I don't know that I can say that we consciously thought of it that way, but definitely her sort of her moral structure is what we would wish for our military to be. There's no question that we were trying to flesh that out because she is Chinese, right? She's a Chinese citizen, and she does not view herself as a traitor. She does not view herself as someone who is betraying her people. She's aware that she's betraying her government, but she is much like Jack Ryan. She's going to do the right thing for the right reasons, even if it is difficult and she has to make those hard choices. So I do think she is what we want from a military leader or from a national leader, that they can look at the global good, the greater good, not be tied to their ego or to alliances that maybe don't mean much in the big picture. So that was one of my favorite things about her. And we did that intentionally. When we made her a managed asset, rather than making her someone who was a spy inserted into China, we made her a person who loves her culture, who is deeply involved in her own culture and history, but she is someone who wants what's best for her culture, not what the government is saying must be my culture now. And I think that makes her a very courageous character because that is difficult. That is insanely difficult. And we did something similar at a different level with, our defense minister who is trying to escape. He
Mhm.
is he is a dedicated Chinese person. He is serving in the government on purpose out of a love for his country, but he sees a decision that could be catastrophic for his country, and he's willing to sacrifice everything, including his reputation, to prevent it from happening. And so those characters, it's so fun for me that you keyed into some of those little subtleties that make the story rich, and I think people enjoy, but they don't always fully embrace or think about. Those characters were very intentionally written that way because it's not all black and white. It's not always Nazi Germany versus the free world. Sometimes there are difficult decisions for good people on both sides that have to be made, and we really wanted to show that.
That's a good
And
point.
and the
Brian?
other thing we talk about a lot with writing is that the iceberg metaphor is used a lot. It's like the author does all this research, but most of it's underwater. You'd never see it. What we're showing you on the page is just sort of the tip of the iceberg. But with this character, we didn't want her to be trope, but we also wanted her to like sort of represent, some of the cultural elements that we saw, in China. It's a patriarchal society, and women don't have the power or haven't made the progress as equals in as they have in the United States. But at the same time, it's interesting. I mean, one of the largest mythological folk heroes is Ha Mulan or Fa Mulan, which is in the Disney. They changed the name, but Mulan is this warrior princess who rises to the occasion. And what's interesting is in China, she's recognized as this great mythological heroine, but try to find a real world example, right? In government or in the military that is an analog for her. And you're gonna have a lot of difficulty finding it. And so we were like, let's imagine this character whose father, back when she's a little girl, decides I'm going to build her up to be, potentially the next hero of China. And like Jeff said, what's interesting is, real life the corruption, the political structure, all these things that are so intractable, you know, kind of stopped her ascension. And so what did she do? Did she give up? No, she kept her moral principles, but then she became, instead of this larger than life hero, she became the spider, right? And so she's a hero, but it's all at night. It's all undercover. It's her network. It's all the things that she's done that have allowed her to become larger than life, but in the shadows.
She and the fact that it's so dangerous for the
So dangerous.
defector and for her. And I want to tell our listeners because this was some scary stuff. She said at one point, if they find me, they'll pull out my fingernails, they'll hang me upside down and by my feet and pour caspicin and vinegar in my nose. They'll fill my sinuses until my skull is on fire from the outside. They'll douse my body in frigid water and electrocute me till my muscles contract and my ligaments pop and my tendons rupture. Then they'll break my bones and knock my teeth out. And I'm like, oh my, I mean, knowing that this is probably in her, this book, true, yet she stays steadfast throughout the whole thing is just amazing. It's admirable. You created an admirable character, and also the man who defected. Amazing.
Thank you.
I want to ask you another question about Lei. She learns from her CIA handler that the government, the Chinese government, is using artificial intelligence, all kinds of pattern recognition, movement tracking to monitor people. And if a flag is tripped, then a human team might analyze that data and then take whatever action they deem necessary. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about this because it seems like information is the new currency.
Yeah, 100%. Information is power, and information has always been power, but our ability to acquire and also sort information is beyond anything anyone could have imagined, 50 years ago. And so, the cyber component of warfare truly is the emerging frontier of modern warfare. You could have the best Navy SEALs and fighter jets and ships and rockets, but if you are not augmenting your information gathering and sorting it using the benefits of artificial intelligence, which is another whole conversation, of course, the pros and cons of artificial intelligence. But one of the pluses of artificial intelligence is that it's not artificial intelligence like a machine making decisions, but the ability for a human being to sort through the millions of bits of data that can come to us now is impossible. But with artificial intelligence, the cyber warrior can now condense that into digestible pieces that can flesh out things that would have been missed otherwise. And so we really have been exploring that not just in this series, but in the Sons of Valor series, in the Tier 1 series. We have a book out that's all about artificial intelligence that shows the good, the bad, and the ugly, called The Sandbox. But it's something we're very fascinated with because you're absolutely right. The future, and the future is now, starting today, you cannot expect to have any type of conflict with a peer nation that does not involve both cyber and artificial intelligence if you want to be victorious. And we wanted to show that. But it also was fun in this book because it showed one way to defeat that, which is this woman who says, okay, so I'm going to be off the grid. Well, how are you going to get done what you need to do off the grid? And she has to go to very 1940
Mm-hmm.
style intelligence work and spycraft in order to subvert this new way of doing the wet work that people do. So it was really fun to be able to use that as the foil for the cyber warfare, right? How can you do it? Well, maybe we're better than artificial intelligence because we can be creative, we can think outside the box, we can come up with solutions that are based on drops and lemon juice for invisible ink or whatever analogy you want to use. So that was a really fun for us to explore that so that we could show a different side of that than what we've explored in some of our other books.
Absolutely. I loved There were so many exciting parts of this book, but one of them was even seeing how the military is grappling with these emerging issues. And you certainly laid the groundwork for, future stories because you just see it gaining in importance. And that was really, really fascinating. You had mentioned a little bit ago too about this progression of careers, and I was thinking about Horatio Hornblower series from C.S. Forester, and how we were able to track that career throughout time. From when he just joined the Navy and all the way to the point when he became an admiral. And I think with your stories and this legacy that you're carrying on, you're right. This has become a part of our common understanding of politics. We see this Jack Ryan, we see Katie Ryan. We want politicians who have these values. I asked myself, and I asked somebody else this week, where are the Jack Ryans for president? And so when you said that earlier, I was like, I've had that exact thought and expressed it this week. That's really cool. So well done and congratulations. We loved this book. We are really grateful that you came on to discuss it. And we'd love to know if you can share a clue about what's on the horizon for each of you.
Well, whatever's on the horizon for me is also on the horizon for Brian and vice versa. Listen, now we've this career marriage is impossible. So everything we do together now. But let's see, what can I do? Well, there's going to be another Ryan book that is going to be coming out in a year, and so we have some ideas about that. But we also have, all of our other work. We're very excited. I guess my mind is focused mostly on Tier 1, Brian, because we're literally turning in, we're just putting the fine touches on book number 9 right now to turn it into our editor on December 1st. So that book will be coming out next year, which we're super excited about. It's going to be a lot of cool questions answered that fans have been emailing us rather frequently about. So they're going to finally get some of those answers, and that's exciting. So that's probably my 2 big ones. What do you got, Brian?
I think it's okay for us to drop the little hint about the next Clancy book, don't you?
Sure. Sure. I just didn't want to make that decision for us.
Please do.
Well, if you're like, no, then I would do. But Katie has another brother. There's another Ryan, Kyle. And so in the next Clancy book, we're gonna get to see what Kyle's up to. So we're really excited. We think the readers will be really excited about that. So yeah, that's the little teaser.
Excellent. I feel like that's breaking news. That's awesome.
It's a
You're
little,
the first to know.
We got a little scoop here, Kristen.
I know.
Love it.
I want to tell our listeners real quick how to get in touch with you. First of all, you are on Facebook, on Goodreads, on BookBub, on X. You've got a website, brianandrewsauthor.com.
No, it's Andrews-Wilson. Andrews.
Yes. And that also too, right? There's 2 websites. We've got andrews-wilson.com.
That's
and
our
then
real website. Yeah.
Stick with that one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, listeners, you know where to find them. And we highly recommend this amazing book. It was so entertaining as well as thought-provoking. So
real world, real life. Good stuff.
Fantastic. Thank you again for coming on.
It's always such a pleasure to see you guys.
Nice to see you. See you before July. Next book.
Yeah. There you go.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, Kristen, I love talking to that writing duo, Andrews and Wilson. They're just amazing. And together, I'm so glad they said they're not doing anything separate, because what they've got going together is fantastic. The other thing I love about this book that I want to tell for our listeners, there's maps in here. They show you exactly what's going on in Asia, because sometimes we forget what's happening and what's the strait and which ocean and where exactly the island is. I kept referring to that quite a few times. I thought that was pretty cool. I also wanted to say this because this kind of blew my mind, because this is true. Katie lands in Taiwan. She says the entire island is a bizarre mix of peaceful little coastal villages, military posts, and weapons that advertised an urgent defense against impending invasion. But people are walking around like they're living happy lives. They're sort of ignoring that they could be attacked at any given moment. I thought about them. I thought about South Korea, but I said, does that almost expand to the US too? We have all kinds of defense mechanisms. We could be on the brink of war at any time. We could name a million countries through the Middle East. And yet we continue to sort of live our lives. I guess we have to.
Yeah.
We have to. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because even physically, when you look at the map, like you pointed out, China looms over Taiwan. I guess one difference might be that in the United States, we've got the ability to protect ourselves. We have a long border. We have a friendly neighbor on our border with Canada, with Mexico. And so that's a really interesting point. I wonder if we'd feel differently if Canada and Mexico did not like us and had designs on our resources and on us politically.
Yes.
That's a very good question.
And even the people who are living in these nations that are surrounded by enemies, they
Yeah.
are still having marriages, going
Yeah.
to school, getting degrees, making friends. I think you've got to live your life. And I know here in the US, for us, we're super grateful for our military. Because of them, we can live our life.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wonder if they think in terms of it's inevitable. So they're not going to waste time every day on a daily basis worrying about it interfering with their lives.
That's a different take.
Interesting. Well, this was a great interview, and I want to tell our listeners about some ones that we have coming up too. We got fantastic books. We have Jessica Hagedorn with Dog Eaters, Victor Mythos, The Silent Watcher, Graham Brown writing for Clive Cussler, Desolation Code, Alex Hay, The Queen of Fives, Samantha Green Woodruff, The Trade-Off, Fiona Davis, The Stolen Queen, Carter Wilson, Tell Me What You Did, Jill Shelvis, Better Than Friends, Heather B. Moore, Lady Flyer, Mark Gagrini, Midnight Black, Marshall Karp, Don't Tell Me How to Die, Brett Battles, writing for Stuart Woods' Golden Hour, and Tess Gerritsen, The Summer Guest. Listeners, we have you in 94 different countries and territories. All 50 states, almost 2,000 cities. We have loyal followers. We are grateful for you. We just ask that you keep on sharing those links. We want more people to tune in for these fantastic authors. And you can stay with us on the radar with our bookstormpodcast.com, our website. You can find us on YouTube, search for Bookstorm and Podcast, and you can see all of these great videos with these authors. And we're on Instagram, on X, on Facebook. We're all over the place. Until next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.